Hello and welcome to another episode of The Beckoning Arm, where we continue our journey into the strange, the mysterious and the paranormal. I'm Paul Fegan, and each episode I'll be interviewing people about their own encounters with the unexplained, and it's with a very open mind that I'll be listening to their tales. I hope you can find a little time in your day to listen along with me. This episode is episode 3, Unquiet Houses.
My name is Amy Potter. I'm originally from Wales. I live in Ireland and I'm an actor.
I wanted to begin by asking Amy to go back to her childhood years in Wales because although initially she didn't have any strange experiences of her own, her family did.
So I must have been about 9 or 10. We were living in North Wales near Carnarvon. It was a really old manor house. It makes us sound like we were really rich. We weren't. It was completely run down and my parents scraped together all the money to buy it and do it up. And it's actually called Plas Newydd in Glynllifon. And there's 2 Plas Newydd, but this one is in Glynllifon. And my parents saw a man standing on the stairs. They originally thought that it was one of the kids. They were both together and they saw a man standing on the stairs. So that was the first. Now there were stories about this house, that the man that had owned it many years ago had died, fallen down the stairs and died. So there were stories around it, do you know what I mean? But it was just the fact that the 2 of them had seen it, and it was only when I was a bit older that they actually told me. But also in that house there was an area to go up the stairs that we had an old Labrador, and she was pretty solid. She wasn't a skitty animal, but she would refuse to walk past the particular spot where the guy was meant to have died. She wouldn't go past it.
And do you know exactly the circumstances in which she...
Well, I do.
Oh.
Wasn't very nice. Apparently the story goes that 2 people came to the door looking for food. They were starving, so 2 people came begging to the door looking for food. He wasn't a very nice man, and there was like a little sort of a dungeon thing beside the stairs, and he put them in there. And yeah, he really wasn't a very nice man, so it's not a nice story. But apparently the story goes that he was coming down to kill them. I don't know if that's true, but he did fall down the stairs apparently and died. So, yeah.
What a horrific story.
Yeah,
do we know a time frame for this, like 1800s?
It would have been even before that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really old house.
And we don't know, of course, I'm sure the legend stops there. We don't know what befell the 2 people who were...
Well, the story goes that they died, but I can't imagine that they would have, because there would have been maids and everything in the house. So I take all of that with a bit of pinch of salt. It's just that was the legend. The story was that he fell down the stairs and that they died. I don't know. But yeah, so that was the first time that in the family I had heard that somebody had seen something, and it was only that there was the 2 of them had seen a man standing on the stairs.
Wow.
Yeah.
And did he do anything, or did he just appear and then disappear? Or
he just walked off into one of the rooms. He just walked off. They were kind of, because they actually called out. My dad said, that's it. My dad said, we called out because we were convinced it was one of you guys. So we called out. And then it just, this figure just walked off into the room and was gone. Yeah.
And how old would you have been at this stage?
I probably would have been about 9 or 10.
Okay, so he wasn't a mistake, an old man.
No, but I had 2 older brothers, and he just,
right.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
And how did this affect your parents? Like, how did it change? Like, was that your parents' first paranormal experience? It was yours, but...
I don't know, actually, whether or not it was. My dad is a very logical man.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be one for fanciful, he's just very logical. Now my mum is as well. My mum's very pragmatic. But I would say she might be a bit more creative, and I'm not saying that she would have made it up or anything, but I just know that my dad, they'd be the first ones to look for alternative of what, you know, so possibilities, exactly. So I don't know if that was their fit. That was the only one I heard about because it was the house that we'd lived in. And it did have a funny feel to it, but it was a really old house. So I didn't think much of it.
And you were 9 years of age, you said?
Yeah.
And did you find out about it pretty much straight away?
No, it was a bit afterwards.
So
I don't think they dare tell us. Otherwise I wouldn't have slept. Yeah.
So they didn't. So when did you hear about that story? Like, do you remember how old you were when you heard about that story?
We definitely moved out of that house before I heard about it. I don't know. I would have been a teenager. I would have young teenager, but we definitely had moved out of the house. There's no way they would have told me about it while we were.
Was it water off a duck's back?
A little bit. I was like, oh, that's weird. And then in my head, I thought you probably just had a glass of wine, you know, and you know.
Maybe they did.
But then I was kind of, well, but it's also possible it was a really old house. There were stories. The dog was a bit weird about that one spot, because there was actually in that estate, there was a pet graveyard. A cemetery, pet cemetery thing. I know it sounds like something. And we were out walking the dog as a family, and she just did the same thing that she did at the bottom of the stairs. She just plonked herself down and was like, I am absolutely not going anywhere near that cemetery. And we were, my dad, my mum and dad, we were all there. We were like, that is the weirdest thing. That's so weird. You know, she wouldn't. Yeah.
An actual apparition seen by both Amy's parents. They seem to have taken that on the chin. Practicalities aside, I can't help wondering what was going through their minds at the time. Anyway, soon enough, they will be selling that house and moving on again.
We moved into a rented house, actually, because we sold that house we were in, then we moved into a rented house while we were trying to find another house to move into, the family to buy. And again, this is in North Wales, and I don't exactly remember the place, but it was in North Wales, not too far from Carnarvon. And it was an old, damp, dark, horrible cottage. I can't really, it was just awful, like this horrible stone. It was freezing, like it was miserable. And it just had this horrible feeling of wet and damp. And we were there, and just, again, these are things that I found about after the event, apart from one event which I knew about, but it was afterwards that my parents had said that it was strange. So in this house, the TV would go on and off and this kind of thing, and you think, well, old house, so of course, you know, weird. Just weird things, a dead mouse found in the orange juice in the fridge. Like, how did it even get in the fridge? I don't know. Just weird, like, oh, that's weird. But there was one thing that happened that was not, which was weird, but also not very nice. That my little brother was a baby at the time, and my parents had put him really big double bed back in the days where health and safety wasn't as, you know, but they put him in the middle of the bed, and they'd created like a boundary of pillows and everything around him. My mum was in the room, and he fell off the bed. So, and he banged his head, and it was really serious. It explains a lot about my brother now. But anyway, it was. I have to get the dig in, but yes, it was serious. Like, and and they couldn't understand how that had happened. They couldn't understand how. Yeah, and everything was intact. And how could he have fallen off the bed? And how, like, it was anyway. And she was in the room. And my dad had said, this is years later that they had said to me that was really weird. When I'd said I hated that house, there was something weird about it, I hated it, and the TV, I said, do you remember the TV used to go on and off? And then they said, well, do you remember your brother falling off the bed? And I said, yes. And then they explained, and they said there was just something really odd about it. And then my dad had explained that in the attic, he'd hated going into the attic. He said it was like a sort of cold something would grip your chest. He said it was freezing, it was dark in there, and it felt like something had just got hold of you. He said he hated going in there. But again, they weren't too, you know, they were just kind of, yeah, it was really weird vibe in that house. I was like, oh my God.
I mean, that's, to be able to brush all that off. Was your brother asleep on the bed?
Yeah.
He was asleep?
Yeah, he was asleep on the bed.
He wasn't playing or
No, he was asleep on the bed.
Wow. And tell me, the orange juice and the mouse and the orange juice.
I only knew about that at Christmas, by the way, because Christmas just gone, so we're in February now. Because we were chatting about these things, and then they mentioned the mouse in the orange juice. I was like, what?
I mean, just to throw it out there, what are the chances? Was one of your brothers a practical joker? I mean, that's beyond a practical joke, though, I suppose.
It is, but I mean, they weren't practical jokers, but they were. One of them in particular was naughty. So I wouldn't put it past him to put a mouse in the orange juice, And it was an old house, so the TV going on and off, and things being a bit weird. And I'm sure if my parents were here, they would come up with more things. And I'm sure there's a logical explanation for all of that. And a freak accident, my brother could have fallen off the bed. Yeah. And it was just that it was an old damp house and everybody got the heebie-jeebies because it was old and damp.
Yeah.
So all of that is possible.
And I'm being very practical and nerdy here, but was the orange juice in a jug? Was it in a carton? I'm trying to think of the logistics of getting a mouse into it.
I don't know. I very much doubt it would be in a jug. Just because that's just not how my parents would roll. It would probably be in a carton. I hadn't really thought of it.
It's hard to get.
Actually, yeah, when you think about it, it's quite hard to get a mouse. You'd have to stuff it through the spout.
Yeah, wouldn't you though?
I just the image of them, how did they find out? Because they'd be pouring it and then all of a sudden the orange would stop and there'd be like a little mouse bomb or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So actually, yeah, when you think about it. So, it's something that my older brother could absolutely have done. I wouldn't put it past him to stuff a mouse in the orange juice. I don't know.
But when you were talking about this at Christmas, were your brothers there?
No.
Okay.
I might ask him now, did you stuff a mouse in the orange juice?
Does he know about that incident? You don't know.
I don't know because he wasn't there. No, I don't know if he does actually. He wasn't there when we were chatting about it at Christmas.
Okay. So how long were you staying at that house for?
About 6 months.
About 6 months.
Wasn't that long.
And then you moved on.
Oh, yeah.
And how old was that house, by the way?
Oh, that again was a very, very, very old house. It would have been the 1800s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And how come you're staying in all these different old houses? Was it just a case of
my
dad was working or something?
Yeah, my dad, they don't like them anymore, but they liked old houses at the time. And they were cheap, like back in the day, they were cheap. I mean, I know Manor House, I sound really posh, but it was completely run down and, nobody wanted it because it was
cold.
But but they were willing to put the work in, so.
And how old now? I know you were 9 in the first house, but how old are you in this house?
I would have been 10 or 11 because I was going into secondary school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that 6 months, nothing else happened?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
My parents said there was all sorts of weird things happening in that house.
But nothing you experienced?
But nothing I knew. No, I just weird. I felt it was not.
It felt oppressive?
It wasn't. Yeah, that was the word my dad used. Oppressive. Very oppressive. Yeah.
And it's a strange thing because we can be quick to ignore feelings, but sometimes when you're buying a house, you get a feeling of when the house is right for you.
Yeah.
For instance, and we often go on that instinct and are right.
Yeah.
You go, no, this feels right.
Yeah.
And you buy a house and you're happy with it and you love it and it feels like home. So why should we ignore when we have a negative feeling about a house? Maybe why should we be so quick to ignore those feelings?
Yeah.
At this stage, if it had been my family, I'd be starting to think we were being followed by some sort of spirit or other entity. And their next move wouldn't allay those fears, as Amy was about to have experiences of her own.
Then we moved. My parents bought a house in the Conwy Valley in North Wales. And I actually don't know how old this house was. It was old, but I don't know the dates. Wasn't as old as the other ones. And I didn't really feel anything in that house, to be honest, until I moved. I must have been about 16 or 17 and I moved rooms when my brothers had a room at the end of the house and they left home. And then I moved into that room because it was a bigger room, you know.
Yeah.
And I was delighted with myself. But it was weird. It was a really cold room. You know, the house wasn't particularly warm because it was a bit older and, you know, but that room was colder than the other rooms. And it shouldn't have been because it had the water tank in it.
So you mean the boiler, like where the hot water?
Yeah, where the hot water was. And it was directly above the kitchen, which is where we had like an old Arga. So it should have been a warmer room, but it wasn't. It was colder, but I didn't really think much of it. I was like, it's just weird. And I never felt anything funny about the room. And then a couple of times I'd be lying in bed and I would just feel like the cat had jumped on the end of the bed. And I was awake, but I would feel, oh, the cat jumped on the bed, and I would look up, but there'd be no cat. And I'd be like, that's really weird. Anyway, didn't think much of it.
You had a cat, but the cat
I had a cat, but a cat, and she'd often come and jump on my bed and sleep at the end of my bed. But the cat wasn't there, so I was like, that's weird. I don't know, didn't think much of it. And then one night I was lying in bed and I was awake. The lights were off, but I was trying to go to sleep, and I just turned over and I just had this weird feeling, and I opened my eyes, and right beside me was a girl with brown hair down to about here in a white nightie, just standing in my bed looking at me. And she was there long enough for me to be able to look at her, and then she just kind of went. And I didn't enjoy that feeling.
Understatement. I mean, this is your first real, your first paranormal experience.
Yeah.
How old are you at this stage now?
I'd say I was about 16, 17.
Oh my God, so you're 16 years of age?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm 54 and I would freak. I mean, I think I'd be just hospitalised for life. But how did you react? I mean, what happened then? I don't know. I mean, I was just kind of disbelief. I remember kind of looking at her. I was like, oh my God. Like, all I could think was, oh my God, there's somebody at my bed. And I think I was so surprised by that. Like, I was just, and then she just kind of went. And then I thought, you know, you might have imagined that. I didn't feel that I had. But there was a piece of me that was going, you know, you're tired. Maybe there wasn't anything. I think I was trying to convince myself so I could go back to sleep, or so I could go to sleep because I was awake, but so that I wouldn't freak out forever. But I started to be a little bit more wary in that room. Yeah. I felt then, I was like, okay, I feel like there's something odd going on in here. And then quite close to that, actually, I had a TV on a desk, and it would go on and off. It would go on and off. Oh my gosh! I just remembered. I had a watch it playing music. I can't even think of the word now. Yeah. But a tape that turned itself on. And I remember it was Michael Jackson was playing. Michael Jackson, don't ask me why I had Michael Jackson, but anyway, it was Michael Jackson. Back in the day,
and I remember being totally freaked out.
Hang on a second now.
It can't have been a tape. It can't have been a tape because nothing had, maybe it was the radio, but I remember having a stereo and music and it switched on and it was Michael Jackson because that freaked me out. God, I can't remember. Thriller. Oh my God. Yeah, I can't remember. I just remember that it was Michael Jackson, and I remember freaking out. I remember that freaked me out. I didn't like that. But closer to seeing the girl, I remember my TV switched itself on, and so it was switching itself off. So it would be on. It kept switching itself off, and I went to switch it on, and as I reached over, a big blob of water about that size, it was significant, landed on my hand from above, and I thought, that's weird. But again, an old house, so I thought, well, you know, there might be a leak. So I got up on the desk, but no, there was no leak. Everything was completely dry. it was at this point that I started to not want to be in that room.
That's what girl,
the music, no, it's still like, you know, but you're trying to be logical, and you're trying to like make sense of it and think, well, yeah, but it could be this and it could be that, and
which is good.
Don't freak out. But that I think I was like, oh no, now that's too much now.
How much time elapsed between seeing the girl and this on-off business?
I'd say the on-off business was quite close. So the on-off business was close to seeing the business, and the water on the hand. I don't remember with the stereo. I don't remember that when that was. I just remember it happening. The whole thing would take, like, things would happen over about the period of a year. But after seeing the girl, things started to happen. Wow. That's when things. So the weight on the bed was the first thing. Something sitting on the bed was the first thing, or the cat, or whatever it was. After that, I saw the girl, and then there were more things. Things started to happen more. The telly started to turn itself off. That's it. It wouldn't turn itself on, it would turn itself off. So I would be watching it and it would just turn off.
Okay, let's go back to the girl, because
I
mean, that's huge to me.
Yeah.
What was her, what did you sense was her demeanour? Like, how did she look at you? Was it a sad look? Was it a neutral look? Was it a kind of a more sinister?
No, she definitely wasn't sinister. She was just looking. I can't really describe it. It's just neutral. Yeah, she was not even curious. She was just looking at me. I can't really describe it. It wasn't that she wasn't sad. She wasn't anything like that.
And she was there for seconds.
Yes, she wasn't there for very long, but she was there long enough. She was there long enough for me to look at her. So it wasn't. I saw her, and she didn't just disappear. I saw her, and she stayed there for a little while. I saw her for a few seconds, and then she went.
I mean, I've never had an experience in my life where I can't tell the difference between reality and a dream, except for those few moments after you wake up where your dream still lives with you, and you still think that was real, and then you come to your senses.
Yeah.
But I'm like, within 10 minutes, I know that what I had was a dream, and I know it's not part of reality. And I know people say this, you know, maybe and people ask this all the time, you sure you weren't dreaming? And I'm always curious about that, because I've never had that confusion in life. I always know, like, I know this is reality now. This isn't a dream.
Yeah.
And there's that clarity and everything else that comes with reality that you just don't get with a dream. And then, as I say, after dreaming, you become conscious of the fact that you had been dreaming, and it was just an illusion or whatever. I mean, percentage-wise, how sure are you, if you're being honest and putting your skepticism aside for a second, because none of us want to be seen to be gullible, and I get that, and I think it's healthy to question it. How sure are you that she was not part of a dream?
I mean, I'm fairly certain, to be honest. So, so people don't think I'm crazy, I'd say 80%, but I would say I'm 85% sure that, you know.
You're pretty sure?
I'm pretty sure that I saw her.
And did you tell your parents, or did you tell your...
I don't recall telling them, and if I did, they obviously didn't make a big fuss about it, but I don't think I really did. I definitely didn't tell any of my siblings, which is, I'm going to come on to something in a minute, and I definitely didn't tell them. And then my two brothers who had been in that room, they were away, they'd moved out, and they rarely visited, because my older brother was in the RAF, and he was the one that had been in that room as well. And yeah, I don't know why I didn't, I suppose I didn't want to seem hysterical. I don't know, or crazy.
Does that speak to how you were as a teenager, that anything out of the ordinary would have drawn too much attention to you, or would have made you feel out of, not normal, or,
Yeah, it wouldn't be that I wouldn't worry about being not normal, but I wouldn't want to sort of, I can't really, I wouldn't want to be making a big fuss. I didn't want to be, I I didn't want. I remember as a I didn't want people to think that I was neurotic or crazy or anything like that. So.
It's hard to know how Amy slept in that room afterwards, but if that's where you live, what else are you gonna do? I think I'd be absolutely terrified. Then again, maybe she imagined it. I mean, it's just Amy's experience and hers alone. Or is it?
Well, so here's the thing. My older brother, who'd been in that room, came home to visit. And I'd moved into that room and he was like, oh, how are you finding that room? I was like,
was that a leading question?
Yeah.
Oh,
as I realised, I was like, yeah, it's fine. I was kind of onto him because I was like, I know you must be asking for a reason. I was like, yeah, fine. Why are you asking? Yeah. He said, oh, yeah. Anything funny happening in that room for you? I was like, maybe.
Not funny.
Why? And he was like, have you ever seen anything? And I was like, maybe. Why? What? Did you see something?
So you wanted him to say
yeah,
first.
because I was like, I wanted to know because I didn't want to say it in case then he would just, because again, he's the one that might have put the mouse in the orange juice. So I was like, oh. And then he said, I saw a girl in that room. I said, you did? You did? What did you look?
How long is this after you've had the experience? How many years?
Probably about a year afterwards.
Oh, only a year?
Yeah, so it wasn't long afterwards. So he'd moved out and he was just visiting home, but yeah, so it wasn't long afterwards. And I'd said, yeah, and I said, oh, what did she look like? What did she look like then? And he described her, and it was the same girl, about 17, 18 years old, brown hair down to right here, wearing a white night dress. And that was when I went, oh my God. And then I was like, did you have, and he said, yep. And I had people, I felt like somebody would be sitting at the end of my bed. And he said, and that room is freezing.
Oh my God. Now,
yeah.
It's not just you.
So now it's not just me.
It's him.
Yeah.
So how did both of you feel? I mean...
well, I didn't sleep too well in that room after that, I have to say, but because then I was like, well, okay, now, then I was like, I know I did. I mean, I knew I did, but now trying to tell myself that I hadn't seen anything and I was imagining it wasn't going to wash anymore, because I knew somebody else had seen it and he had described what I had seen.
And what did he say when you corroborated that? When you told him? He
just went, oh my God, yeah. And that's when we were like, and the room, and he was like, yeah, that room is freezing. And I was like, yes, it is. It's so cold.
I mean, that's pretty mind blowing.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, you weren't in the room at the same time.
Yeah.
You had experiences like maybe years apart.
Yeah.
Who knows? And you both saw exactly
the same thing. And she was standing next to the bed too. For him, standing next to the bed.
And have you any idea if he convinced himself he was seeing things? Or
I didn't. I mean, to be honest, when he said it,
He was obviously curious, though. It was on his mind.
Yeah, he was obviously on his mind. I wondered, did she see anything?
Oh.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Wow. So now we have two corroborating witnesses. For me, that really shifts things away from being the imagination of one person. Did Amy see the girl again?
No. Okay. I only saw her once.
Okay, you only saw her once?
I only saw her once, and all the weird stuff carried on. But then...
it carried on?
Yeah, I mean, it all just...
For how long?
Every once in a while. For as long as I was in that room until I went to university. And then
So what age would you been then? 18, 19?
18, yeah, 18. Something like that, yeah.
So maybe 2 years then? 2 years. And then you went to university, your parents are still in that house.
Yeah.
Did they ever have any weird stuff in that house?
No.
Wow.
It seemed to be only that room.
Okay.
And only my brother and I that I'm aware of.
And tell me this now, just as a kind of an aside, while you were in university, where did you go to university?
Liverpool.
And you know nothing weird.
No.
So it's not like there was something, following you. You're not the common denominator.
No, freaking me out now. No, and if, to be honest, like in university, if I was going to be seeing stuff, it would have been there, given the time I had, But no, I didn't. Nothing. And nothing for years and years and years and years.
And in the meantime, are your parents still in this house?
They were for a little while, then they sold it when I went to university, or pretty close.
And they moved on again.
Yeah.
And so, okay, and so what happens after university? Do you have any more experiences in Wales?
No, none in Wales, and nothing for years, for a very long time, until recently. Well, until I say recently, 7 or 8 years ago.
Okay, so I'm at this stage ruling out the notion that something is following Amy around. She goes to university, she has no strange experiences there, and she basically gets on with her life. So what happens next?
I moved to the Caribbean. I went to work in the Caribbean.
Really?
Yeah.
At what age?
Early 20s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I met my husband there, and from there we moved to Toronto, from there to Amsterdam, and he's Irish. So we had 2 kids in Amsterdam, and then we ended up moving back to Ireland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And what year are we up to now? Like, how old would you be?
So it was 2013 when we moved back, and we were renting. So we rented a couple of places, and then we ended up in a place in Bray, renting a place in Bray.
Okay, so describe this place to me. Like, period, looks.
So it's very old, built in the 1800s. And yeah, it's a really big building, built in the 1800s by this architect. I think he was an architect. And what happened, there's a main piece to the house, and the rest of it was then divided up into apartments and houses. So I think there's 4 in total, and then there's the big house. And we were renting one of the small houses,
sort of like
the Muse, one on the end, and that was apparently the oldest piece of all of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's beautiful, all a beautiful building, really beautiful, like, yeah, and it's protected and everything. It's phenomenal.
And what year did you move into this?
Gosh, where are we now? 2016, something like that, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
2016, something like that, yeah.
And you've 2
or
children.
2017, yeah.
So you 2017, and your children are how old at this stage?
But the kids would have been, I think Ewan would have been 10, so Lily would have been about 8. So yeah, 8 and 10, or 7 and 9, something like that.
And so describe the arrangement, you know, in this house that you're in, this small annex.
So there's like there's like a little courtyardy area. It's lovely. Then you're surrounded by the other houses, and we were in this little mews. So there's the kitchen. There's a little room off that. There's a bigger room off that. And then up the stairs, there's a really long hallway. And at one end there's a room that we used as a spare room and a bathroom to stop it. So if you wanted to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you had to walk the whole hallway past this spare room to go to the bathroom. And then the other 3 rooms were at the other end of the hallway. So that's where, Ewan would be, then Lily, and then our room would be at the end of that.
Okay. So what happens next?
So nothing for a while. We moved in, nothing for a while. Beside the spare room, there was a cold patch beside the spare room at the other end of the hall. So we were all at one end and at the other end, just near the bathroom. It was cold. I mean, it was a cold house. It's cold, old house. The heating wasn't fantastic, so you would expect it. But that was always cold. It was always colder. And there would be funny cold patches in the house. Even in the summer, the window frames weren't great, so there would be breezes. So you can kind of push all that to one side. It's an old house. There's, cracks in the window frames. Of course, there's going to be breezes and cold patches. But that was about it. And then one night, my husband and I, well, my daughter Lily, she started not sleeping very well in her room next door to us. She was always a good sleeper, and she just started not sleeping well. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and she'd come running, and it was very distinct. I'll put my coffee down so I could do the sound. Very distinct sound when she ran on the floorboards, on the old floorboards. It's kind of like this, because she'd be running as fast as she could, to get to them. She'd fling open the door and she'd be like, I can't, I'm frightened. And so we'd go and she'd go back to sleep, and then we'd go back to sleep. And that happened for a while, and then all of a sudden we would hear that noise and the door wouldn't open. And we were like, we were waiting for it to open, because here she comes. And then the door wouldn't open. And we'd go to check and she'd be asleep. And we were like, okay, that's really weird. Like, she's properly asleep, like proper, you know. And we were like, that's really weird. And so this happened a few times. And not only that, but it happened while we were awake. So we have a bad habit of watching our iPad in bed. Don't do it anymore, it's bad for you, don't do it. But because it was cold anyway, so we'd be lying in bed cold, watching a show or something on the iPad. And it would happen down the hall, like real kind of like down the hall. And Dave started to jump out of bed as quickly as possible to see could he catch her in the act. No, she'd be asleep. And we were like, oh my God. We started to realise that's not Lily. That's not Lily. That's something else. So we went through all could it be a bird in the attic? Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be the other? But it was very distinct, and we were awake, and it was the exact same sound she made. So we started to get a little bit freaked out. We were like, okay, it's a bit not enjoying that feeling, not enjoying that at all. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom, and I can't tell you, I'd be like down the hall like this, and then went back. And I just, and it happened more and more frequently. And then one night we were watching the iPad, and we heard, so the house has, I didn't describe it, the house had these old wooden shutters that you pull like that, and then you put a lever, it sort of slots in. And it wasn't windy, there was no wind, but the shutters in Lily's room, they're on the inside of the house. And we heard Lily's shutters in her room, and we have them too in our room, and ours didn't make a sound. And then, like I say, there was no wind, it was a quiet night, and we heard her shutters go like this. And we were like, oh my God, what the hell is that? And then we hear Lily screaming, my shutters are moving, my shutters are moving. And we were like, oh my God, and we ran in, we were like, it's all right, darling, it's all right. And I was like, oh, silly mummy didn't close them properly. Ha ha, it was just the metal thing falling down. It wasn't. I had closed them. It wasn't that. And they were shaking. It wasn't the sound of a metal thing coming down. It was the sound of shutters shaking violently. So at this point, Dave and I soiled ourselves. I was like, this is like, it was not fun. So we were like, I'm not enjoying this at all. So yeah, we were pretty worried at that stage, unpleasant. And this is all over a period of time. Like, it's over a period of years, and it wouldn't be every night, but it would be quite often that there would be something like the sound. It was either Lily running or and sometimes doors would kind of pop open, but again, an old house, and I'd be like, oh, it's just a breeze, you know. And one night Dave went out, and it was close to midnight, and I didn't sleep very well in that house on my own.
Surprise.
Understandably. I just didn't like it. It just freaked me out. And I was waiting for Dave to come home, and I heard the lock in the door. And we've 2 little dogs, by the way, who, if anybody was to try and come in, well, one of them's dead now, but the 2 of them would have barked. And so if anybody came in, we would have known about it. But I heard the lock and the key go, you could hear it from upstairs. I always heard it when he could come in, and you hear the door open. And I heard the door close, and I was like, oh great, he's home, that's great, oh, okay, I can go to sleep now. And I was lying there, and normally when he comes in, he's had a couple of drinks to make himself a piece of toast or something, rummaged it in the fridge. And I was like, that's funny, I don't hear him rummaging or anything, that's okay. And then I was like, oh, he'll be up in a minute. But he didn't come up. And then just as I was thinking, I wonder where he is and what's he doing down there, my phone beeped. I had a message, and it was Dave, and it said, just getting in a taxi now. Well, I was like, oh my God. And I've got the 2 kids asleep. So I was thinking, I'm even scared thinking about it. I thought I have to go down and check that there's nobody in the house, because I've got the 2 kids. And then in my head, I thought that I know there isn't anybody in the house because the dogs would have barked. They would have barked.
But you heard the lock as clear as...
I heard, I was awake. I was reading, I was awake, and I heard it, and I heard it, and I knew the exact sound of Dave coming home, because you just know it. And so I went downstairs, and there was nobody there. And I just thought, oh no, this is not. So I texted Dave, I was like, where are you? I said, I'm after hearing you come in and you're not here. And he was like, oh my God. So he came home, I told him all about it. I said, I can't, I don't like it. So I started Googling then. And I Googled, I feel like such a lunatic, but I Googled like why it's whatever it was imitating the sound of the family. So ghost imitate, and then I read that. I know I sound like an absolute lunatic, but I read that they can, if a ghost or something wants you to know it's there, it just wants attention, so it'll imitate the sounds of the family. And I thought, well, that sounds absolutely bonkers, but that seems to be what's happening, and there's no other explanations that I can think of, or that Dave can think of, who, by the way, works in IT. I mean, he's a pretty
scientific.
Yeah, he wouldn't be one for flights of fancy. I'm an actor, so you could kind of go, she's an actor.
So I don't know, what's he making of all this? What are you both?
Oh, he said there's something funky going on here. I'm not. Yeah, he said there's something funky. Like he agreed. I said, do you think? And he was like, no, Amy, there's something funky going on. Like there's something here. Like I was like, oh God, even Dave thinks there's something here. So I looked it up, and I thought, well, and then I thought, how do you stop it? And this sounds even crazier. And I came across this thing that said, well, if it wants to be recognised, just talk to it and ask it. Maybe if you ask it not to do stuff, it won't do. I know as I'm saying it. Dave and I, so I said it to Dave. I said, look, I know this is crazy, but should we, because the kids, Lily wasn't sleeping now at this point, by the way. Dave was having to sleep on a mattress in her room on the floor. So we said, look, we'll just do it. And I said, I'll do the talking. So I went upstairs and I walked, and I was in my room. We were in our room, and I spoke to it in there. And I went to the spare room where I had a feeling things were coming from, because it was just something weird. And people who had stayed had said, by the way, if you ever had that room's a bit weird, it's cold and there's a weird vibe. My sister and my mum had said it. And actually recently Dave's sister, only a few months ago, said that room, by the way, and I hated that house, is a weird room. And I was like, funny you should say that. And I was telling her, because I didn't tell people about this when they came to visit, because they wouldn't come to visit. Anyway, so I spoke to the ghost. I said, this sounds so weird. I said, look, hi, I know, you're here and we hear you, and, and we know that we're in your space, and thank you for letting us be here. So stupid. And I said, and then I felt bad. I said to Dave, I don't want it to go because it lives here. If there is something here, it belongs here, and we're in its space, and it's not fair to ask it to leave. So I said, you know, we're happy for you to stay, and you know, because we understand this is your home. I said, but could you just tone it down a bit so that, you know, because we're freaking out. So can you just not? We just don't want to hear or see or have anything happen because we're freaking out. And maybe it's psychosomatic, but it just, for me, it stopped. And Dave said everything calmed down for him. He said it's whatever it was, you could feel it within days, everything. I was like, do you feel that difference? And he said, yeah, it's different. So, and then everything calmed down. So, yeah. But I thought that was the extent of it. And we've since moved. And we've been out of that house for about a year. We live in a new house now, no old houses. And because you mentioned doing this podcast, so I thought, I wonder, we couldn't possibly be the only people to have had experiences there. We couldn't be. I wonder if there's anything online. So I Googled, well, didn't I? Have a surprise. There's an article about a family who lived not in the house we're in, but in the main house, which is a really big house beside it, which is all attached. And they had a lot of experiences.
Wow.
They did.
And I mean, when you searched, I presume you searched the name of the house and ghosts or paranormal.
I actually searched Bray.
Oh my God. You just searched
I just searched Bray and saw it come up. And then I saw the name of the house and I was like, oh my God. Okay. And I read it and it was...
So, and how did that, like, did it feel good in that it corroborated what you'd seen?
Yeah, I was delighted because I was like, oh my God, thank God. Like, you know, I mean, the thing is, Dave had heard, and I'll come to it later, but I then discussed, the kids were young at the time and I still haven't spoken to my daughter about it because she is the type that would still freak out, but my son is now 17. So at Christmas time, I chatted with him about it and I said, have you ever heard or come across anything funny in that house? And he was like, well, let me tell you.
No.
And then because we were talking about it and I was talking to Dave, and Dave then came out with things. He said, I didn't tell you at the time because I didn't want to freak you out further. But there were things that they had seen and heard, and even Dave's sister had experienced that I didn't. So there was a lot more going on in that house. Oh yeah. So the door's opening. So they'd be closed. They're old-fashioned doors, you know, the knobs like that, and you would turn them. Ewan and Dave both said, now I'd had doors opening on me, but the wind or whatever, but they'd had it a lot, and they'd had it even sitting in the kitchen, which I'd never had an experience in the kitchens. They would be sitting in the kitchen and the door would open. Ewan had it in his room, so he'd be lying in bed in his room and the door would just open. So it would turn and open.
And would he see?
Yeah, he'd see it turn and open. And expect somebody, classic, yeah. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, I don't know. I don't know.
But you didn't tell me.
No, I know. And you can't explain it, or why didn't you, you know, and he's like, I didn't. But for Ewan, like, I don't know how he didn't tell me, because the things that he came out with, and I said, because I hadn't told him, we hadn't told the kids. We tried to hide it because we didn't want them to be frightened. And it was only at Christmas. And even then I didn't say to Ewan what I said. I did the same thing that I did with my brother. I said, have you experienced? And then I was like, what was it? So he said about the doors, and I said, interesting. And then I said, anything else? And he said, I heard old-fashioned music. I said, what do you mean old-fashioned music? He said it was coming from downstairs. And he said everybody had gone to bed because it would be late at night and you and Dad had gone to bed and Lily was in bed. There was nobody but the dogs downstairs. And he said, I heard it a few times, old-fashioned music. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, like Jack in the Box music, that kind of tinny music.
So like an organ grinder?
Like kind of tin music, from a tin, like tinny do, you know, that kind of, yeah. I said, right, okay. anything else? He said, yeah, I'd hear somebody walking along the hall.
Now, was it similar to what you guys heard? It wasn't that frantic running?
No, he said he heard somebody walking quickly. He said walking quickly. So I don't know if it was the same. We heard frantic.
Well, he would have been quite young when he heard it.
He would have been quite, he's 17
years,
now, so he would have been quite young, 10, 11, but we were there until he was 16.
And did he say how it made him feel?
He said he was frightened. He said he was frightened. He would lie in his bed like this. He was frightened. No, he didn't say anything, and he didn't come and tell us. So one day, one night he heard the footsteps, and he said, I made myself get out of bed, and I made myself go and open the door and look in the hall. And he said, I saw a figure, a man walking along the hall. And that is not nice, because that's my son. So then I felt protective, because I was like, oh my God, that's really scary. So those were his experiences.
Did he say, he didn't say whether the man was walking away or towards
Walking
him?
away.
Walking away, so not looking at him.
Walking towards our room, so not looking at him, just walking along the hall that way.
That's the first encounter with a man in that house. Apart
Yeah.
from you hearing the front door opening, which you don't know who was responsible for that, if anyone, but
Yeah.
that's the first encounter with a man in that
A
house.
man in the house. I always felt it was a male thing. I don't know. That's just, I don't know. That's just my imagination working there.
Yeah.
But those things with Ewan, and I hadn't told him. He didn't know what we had experienced. It was when he told me what he had experienced, then I filled him in on what we experienced, and he was like, oh my God. And then he's now 17 and we live in a new house, so he's okay. But then, so Dave came home from work after I'd been talking to you, and I said, Dave, I said, I had no idea. I said, did you know that Ewan had these experiences? He said, no, I didn't. I said, did you know? I said, the doors. And he said, yeah, that happened to me, the doors. He said, sitting in the kitchen. He said, it happened with my sister. My sister and I were sitting there, and the door, we saw the handle go and the door open. He said, we both shut ourselves. I said, yes, yeah, you did. And I said, did you know he heard music? And Dave said, I heard music. I was like, what are you he said, I didn't want to freak you out anymore. He said, I heard music, like old-fashioned tin, like from a music box music.
Oh, God.
Oh.
So, and of course your daughter had experiences because you, like with the shutter and that.
Yeah.
But you've never told her of your experiences.
No, and I wouldn't
so you
dare.
don't know if she's had experiences she hasn't told you about.
Yeah. I imagine she would have, because she was the type that would just... She's like, this happened. But you wouldn't know. I would have thought that I would have told you that Ewan would have told me too, but he didn't. And I don't know why I didn't tell my parents, and I don't know why he didn't. Maybe he thought that we would think he was being silly. I don't know. But so this is interesting. I then said to Ewan, again, an open question. I said, was there a point that it ever got better? Did it ever get better or stop? And he kind of thought for a little while. He said, yeah, it did actually. It did. All of a sudden, he said, now I still heard things. He said, but I mean, it's an old house, so, you know, it might have just, he said, but never like that. He said, it just kind of stopped.
And did it coincide with?
Well, he said he doesn't remember exactly when it stopped, but he said it was a good couple of years before we'd moved out of the house, which would coincide with when I went, I can't, enough's enough. We have to try and do something.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So very much benevolent spirits at all, because they were receptive to your concerns about being afraid and feeling kind of oppressed in your own house.
I always felt, and I said it to Dave as well afterwards, I said, I always felt after we'd had the chat with them that something had changed, that I felt that we were being, this is so crazy to say, I know, but I felt like we were being minded, that they were looking out, that we were being not cared for, it's a really strong word, but so there was somebody looking out for us. I really had this weird feeling about it, and I said it to Dave, and he said, I would agree. He said something changed. He said something changed, and I felt that too, that there was something, you know, that we were comfortable. It was a weird thing to do.
So you obviously liked it as a couple. Do you know what I mean? Like,
we didn't like it when it was.
Respected the house, and
Yeah, maybe.
there was something.
Or maybe it just wanted. If there was anything, I'm saying if there was anything. I mean, I just can't. It's really hard to deny. At this point, with different people in the house, later on, without knowing that other people had experiences, like Ewan did not know, and he didn't hear us talking about it because we were really careful. We didn't even tell people that I didn't tell my mum, I didn't tell my sister, because I wanted people to come over and have a nice time when they stayed. I didn't want them to not want to come.
Apprehensive about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your daughter, you were saying she would freak out. Do you think she'll see this?
No.
Okay.
If I'm in anything, she will. She's like 15, so nearly 15. If I'm in anything, she's like, oh, turn it off.
There is so much activity in that house that when you sum it up, it really does sound like someone vying for attention. But to what end? Just to be noticed? Acknowledged? Whoever or whatever it was, they did seem quite benevolent in that their activity seemed to stop on request. Amy made a random, desperate attempt to communicate, and it paid off. So, does she think she's got some sort of connection? Is she intuitive?
I am quite intuitive. I do pick up on feelings very easily. And as an actor, you have to be right sensitive to things. So I would say that I probably am, but we have lived in a lot of old houses, so a lot of that would be coincidental. I wouldn't have said that my older brother is the complete polar opposite to me. So he wouldn't have, he would definitely wouldn't be one for picking up on things. And he had an experience. But I think, so a lot of it is probably coincidental, just in the type of houses that we lived in. And I always loved old houses, right up until...
So yeah, up until when did you love old houses?
Up until I think I just got a bit older and I just like my creature comforts now. It's not to do with ghosts or anything like that, to be honest. I would still live in an old house. Yeah, they're just exactly. They're just harder. It's harder to be warm in them. That's, and I was freaked out in the last place, but not in I wasn't afraid. I'm not afraid of mice. This is the only way I can think of it, is that I'm not afraid of mice. I like mice, but I don't want one to jump out at me in the middle of the night when I'm trying to go to the bathroom. Yeah. That's all it is. I just don't like the shock of it. If someone was to say, this is about to happen, you're about to see this now, I'm like, great, okay, that's fine. But I just don't like the surprise of it. Yeah.
So I have to ask the big question. After all of this, does Amy believe in ghosts?
I don't know if I believe in ghosts, which sounds odd considering all the things. I don't know if they're ghosts. I don't know what it is. There's something, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, so you believe there is something.
I believe there is I believe there is something. I didn't always believe, but the last experience kind of tipped me over, especially when there's another story connected to that house from a different family. But it's not that I believe in ghosts. I couldn't even say 100%. My feeling is that there's something else that we mightn't know about. I don't know what it is, but there's something, because there was something happening in that house. That different people experienced without knowing. Ewan was the one for me. That was the one when he said, and the music. But that I just thought, no, there's something else that we don't know about, that I can't explain, going on.
Okay.
I don't know if it's ghosts.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ghosts.
So what do you think? What do you think it might be if it isn't ghosts? Do you think it might be some? Because I kind of think that even if ghosts do exist, right? People say, well, there's science on one hand, and then there's, I don't know, spirituality or whatever you want to call it, the paranormal. But to me, even if we found out that ghosts did exist, it would be within the realms of science anyway. So I don't think they're separate. I think we would find a scientific way of explaining why we can see the dead after they're gone. And I'm not saying I believe that, because I've never had an experience.
Yeah.
But if I had the experiences that you've had, maybe I would be like you. Maybe I'd be thinking, well, there's definitely something, but I don't know what to call it.
Yes. Well, I think about science, and I think about, you know, I think about science, and I think, you know, how much, there's so much more in science that we don't know about and can't, you know, and that we're still figuring out. What's to say there isn't something else? I don't know that it's the dad. I don't know that. I don't know, is it some sort of an energy? I feel like my only way to kind of think, is it some kind of an energy? Is it something like a residual energy? Is it a new energy? Is it something we're giving off? I don't know. But there's something, and you know, there's something. I don't know what it is. I can't describe it. I don't know what it is. I don't have the explanation. But there's, yeah.
And do you think those experiences you had prepared you for, you know, seeing something again somewhere else? Or is it like you said about the mouse? I mean, if it's the shock of it, I think
I'd always be shocked and know, oh my God. I would always be, I'd rather, it's not, the thing is, it's a weird thing, right? Because I'd rather not, but then at the same time, I'm so inquisitive. I'd like to, whereas before I would have said, oh, please don't, I don't ever want to, I never want to see anything, I don't want to see a ghost, I don't want to, or whatever you want to call it, I don't want to hear or see anything unexpected or that I can't explain. Now, I'm kind of like, I'm really curious. What is it? What was that? And yeah.
Do you think you'd be more analytical now because you're kind of hungry to know what it is, rather than just experiencing it?
Yeah, I think I'd be in the moment as well, a bit more able to go, as opposed to going, oh my God, I'd be a bit more kind of, right, you know. But then I think, I don't know, does that mean that I won't? I don't know. Yeah. I'm just really curious. I'd love to know what that was.
And how does it make you feel, having gone through that and hearing other people's stories? Does it add a veracity to them? Or are you still a skeptic?
I'm still a skeptic. Isn't that bad? So when other people say things, I'm like, yeah, but you know, it could be this and it could be that. I'm still in that zone with what we happened to, but there's certain things I'm like, well, what could the music be? I mean, I didn't hear it, but they heard the music box. But I mean...
But that's the thing, isn't it? Because we could say that 90% of things maybe are, if we can explain them away by pipes creaking or doors opening because of the wind. Yeah. It's not that we're interested in.
Yeah, it's those things, yeah.
It's the 10%.
Yeah.
You know, like in the field of UFOs, they say that something like 93% of reports are explainable.
Yeah.
Who cares? Nobody's interested in the 93%. They're only interested in the 7%.
That's it. Because, I mean, a lot of it could be explained away by old pipes, a breeze, you know, like the coal patches, those things. And even, you know, a couple of times the sound of people walking, like, yeah, you could say maybe there was a bird in the attic. I mean, there wasn't, because Dave actually went in there one day to have a look, because there was it looked like the slate had moved. So we went in to have a look in the attic. And I was like, while you were in there, did you come? No, there's nothing. So, I mean, but you can still, if you really dig in, you can find, but it is those things. And even you and seeing somebody walking in the hall, you could say, yeah, but he was a young boy, and, you know, and he could have imagined, you know, and the door's opening, it could be a breeze. I mean, yeah, the doorknob turning, that's a bit, but you never know, maybe it wasn't closed properly. But it is those little things like the music box, you know, people experiencing the same things, but not realizing. And then coming together and having those that you're saying, the lock in the door. I mean, and I heard Dave come in and shut the door. Not just open the door, but shut the door.
The
dogs didn't react. I mean, I opened and went to see if I'm shitting myself going in, opening the door, and the dog's like, what? Why are you awake? It's like, and I'm like, oh, you know, yeah. So it's those things. But because I knew I was doing, it's just really weird how I didn't look into this at the time. But I did Google the area to see whether any other experiences, thinking there must be something. If we'd experienced something, there must be something. And if there isn't, I don't know. Anyway, so it came up the main part of the house. There was a family that lived there. They've long gone. There's an article. And they experienced a lot of stuff, a lot more than we did. They saw a lot of, so some of it is to me, and I'm reading that and I'm thinking that's a bit fanciful, because they saw a woman, they saw a man. But here are some things that I was reading, I was going, oh my God, Dave, look at this. They heard some of the same noises. They heard music box music. Sorry, hitting the microphone. They heard music box music. Yeah. It's in the article. They heard the same music. And I was not aware of this article. It was only a couple of months ago that I Googled to look to see was there any other stories, or 2-3 months ago. So long gone from that house. Don't ask me why I didn't think to Google before, but I didn't. But yes, they heard music box music. They saw people. They heard agitated footsteps was the word she used, agitated footsteps. Like, that's how we would just, when I said that, Dave was like, oh my God, that's what they were like. They were agitated. Doors opening and closing. They saw people, which only Ewan said he saw somebody, but they saw people, and it seems more clearly than they saw them quite clearly. They there's a man they called George and another lady they saw, and several, they had people visit, and people visiting also saw things and heard things. But there was one thing that was really interesting towards the end of the article. She said that things started to get really agitated in the house. The noises got worse, the running and the walking. She said the agitated walking in the hallways got worse. They were getting builders in to do some work in the house, and it got worse. So she decided, this is the bit that I was like, that's so weird. They decided to speak to them and explain what was happening in the house. A bunch of mentlers. And she said to them, same kind of thing. She said, look, we know, and but we're getting some work done, and, it's going to take a while. She actually says, it's going to take a while because we haven't got loads of money. But when we're done, the house is going to look lovely, and we're not, it's going to look, hopefully, respecting the house, and hopefully it's going to look. And she said, it all calmed down. Everything calmed down. And
what
that
a coincidence that we looked up a way to deal with this.
And they did the same.
And they did the same thing.
I think that's weird.
Wow.
So that's the same building. So that different part of the house, but the same building.
Wow. These all seem like very tangible experiences. Apparitions, sounds, corroborating witnesses. So if they're not ghosts, what's going on?
My mum has an interesting theory. My mum thinks with these things, because she's had experiences through her life. And she said to me one day, she said, I don't even know that it's ghosts. She said, I feel like it's like, when a camera is taking a picture, the old-fashioned cameras, it would be the light coming in and it would leave a mark. She said, I feel like it's an end, like something has happened to somebody, like a big event, and there was some sort of massive energy happened at that time, and it's like an old photograph. It's stuck, it's there. It's like an energy that just keeps going. And I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know.
Well, Amy's mum has actually stumbled on a known theory. In the 19th century, some psychic researchers believed that traumatic events were somehow being recorded by inanimate objects like stones and bricks, and were being released later as a kind of video playback of events. And in 1972, there was a BBC drama written by Nigel Neal called The Stone Tape, which was based on this idea and kind of retrospectively gave the theory a name. It's an interesting hypothesis. I wonder if Amy's had any thoughts on her own belief systems and the theological ramifications of believing in ghosts.
No, I have. And here's the thing, right? So there are things about it that don't make sense to me. So if there are ghosts, like let's just say that they were ghosts in the house we were in, and we spoke to them and they've they settled it. So they're there and they're listening and they're sentient somehow. Are they trapped? Right? So I'm like, is that it? So there are so many different things for afterlife. So if you believe, depends on what you believe. So if you believe you're reincarnated, right? Well, they can't be ghosts because everybody gets reincarnated. They go into a different body, right? So that means they can't be ghosts. And I've heard stories of, people kind of going that, I don't know, they go somewhere else, heaven, wherever that is, a different parallel universe. I don't know. Because there are people out there who can talk to people who've passed, apparently. I don't know. Well, then they can't be ghosts because they would have moved on. So it's just, and then, so people have talked about, I don't know, people passing on and being somewhere for a bit and then going, like they talk about past lives. So they're reincarnated, but I don't know, they're in the ether or something for a bit and then they go. So none of that makes sense then for ghosts. You know what I mean? Well, so I'm like, do you go somewhere else or do you stay do you haunt where you're, like, do you pick a place? What happens?
Some very valid questions, and naturally with a phenomenon we don't fully understand, there are going to be lots and lots of questions. But that said, have Amy's experiences affected her thinking around major concepts such as life after death? Has she had any thoughts about it?
I do think about it, and it has changed it a little bit in that I feel more strongly that it can't be it, that it's not it. But of course I could never know, and I might just be wanting that to be true because as we get older, people that we love pass away, or our own death. You don't want it to be the end, so we cling to this possibility, this hope that it's not the end. So that the people that we love don't leave us entirely. So for all I know, that's what I'm clinging on to. But all I know is that we experienced something. I have experienced a few things, and that last one for me, there was something going on that I don't know about, and whatever it was had seemed to have knowledge of us being there, or we were able to somehow communicate with it somehow. And maybe that was imagination, maybe because we'd had the conversation, then all our imaginings stopped. That's entirely plausible. But my feeling is that there's something out there and that there's something different, and it feels like it's some sort of an energy or something, and that we haven't quite learned to explain what it is yet, but it's there. I feel like there's something there.
I have so many thoughts on this. Amy's had paranormal experiences in both Wales and Ireland, things she's actually seen and heard. And you'd think that she's now a believer, and indeed she is. But in what? I thought the obvious conclusion would be ghosts, but Amy's thrown me a curveball. For me, I thought we had three options. Either we were sceptical, where we'd pretty much disbelieve any evidence. We were agnostic, which is where we're open to the idea but just haven't seen any evidence. Or lastly, we were believers, where some event, account or evidence had led us to believe that ghosts were actually real. But I hadn't considered that someone might become a believer without being certain that what they believed in was ghosts. I've said before that we don't know who we are, where we've come from, or where we're going. So even with becoming a believer in paranormal events, how can we even begin to make sense of what we've seen? And I think for that reason, Amy makes a very astute observation. She's seen evidence with her own eyes and heard it with her own ears. But evidence of what exactly? What does it point to? Will we ever know? Perhaps not, but it will never stop many of us from being really, really curious, and perhaps even making a podcast about it.